So today we're going to be looking at this sculpture right here. This is a bust of Jabba called the Big Boss by Michael White, who is a UK-based sculptor who has, I guess, worked quite a bit in the industry, motion picture industry, but also does some, I guess, private runs of sculptures and things like that. I don't know. I did not get this directly from him. It's based on his sculpture when made with his permission, but I got this from someone in the US who is doing a small run of them. They asked me not to tell them their information or anything like that, just because they already probably can't make enough to satisfy a demand of their own little sort of private group that they run. And so, don't really want to be overrun with people wanting one of these, which is entirely possible because this is a very impressive piece, actually. So it's pretty sizable and heavy. I don't know if you can tell by my hand here, but it's definitely larger than, say, a 1/6 scale Jabba that we saw with the the Sideshow Collectibles figures. I would say it's closer to 1/4, possibly 1/5, maybe somewhere in between there. But a nice size for a bust like this. It comes on a base, which I have not yet attached the head to, so you can see just got a little slot there. And, this is a pretty hefty piece here. I don't know if I doubt if it's solid, but it's certainly thickly cast, so it feels sturdy. Put that back on the base there. It also comes with, as I say, a base and some little gargoyle attachments and rings that you can put on the base there on, each of the four sides. The rings here just sort of fit like that. I was originally thinking of replacing these with metal rings, but I think once I sand these a little bit to even them out, I think they'll be just fine. I did try to go to the local craft store and pick up some metal rings, and they didn't have the right kind, so that's part of what informed my decision to do that, but I think it'll be fine. Anyway, what I'm going to be doing today is basically just painting this, assembling it and painting it, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to use my airbrush, which I have not used as much as I really intended to, for various reasons. I've had some trouble just getting used to it, but I think this is a good opportunity to make use of that. But I'm hoping also that my paint job will do justice to this very impressive sculpt that Michael has created here. It is hard to capture Jabba as a character like this, and he's done a fantastic job. The other thing I should mention, too, is that there really haven't been any busts of Jabba made, unless you count the life-sized bust that I have on my wall. That's really sort of a category unto itself. But this kind of bust on a base, there's been probably hundreds of Star Wars busts from places like Gentle Giant, but they've never made a Jabba. So I'm really excited to finish this and maybe display it with some of my other busts in my collection. So let's get going. So just to be on the safe side, I went ahead and washed all of the pieces with some dish soap and water. I used a toothbrush and kind of scrubbed the surface just to make sure that there wasn't any mold release or anything like that left on the pieces, which could be a problem if you're trying to get paint to adhere. Now I'm going to go ahead and assemble it. I have some epoxy glue I think I'm going to use for the head and the base, just because, well, I want to make sure it's really on there well, and for the other parts, it would be kind of a pain to try and use epoxy going all the way around, and they're hanging like this, so I'm going to use just super glue with activator for the smaller pieces. So let's go ahead and do that. So many of my projects today start with 3D printing a figure or a sculpture or something and then moving on to painting it. It's kind of interesting to do this with a pre-made kit like this. This is, I suppose, what you would call a garage kit, something that one person creates, stereotypically in their garage using a silicone mold or something along those lines to make a small run of statues. It does kind of make me appreciate how easy 3D printing has made things, because I can get a model from designers around the world and have them physically in my hands within a matter of hours, but this bust is big enough that it would be challenging to 3D print for most people. So here it is, primed white. I was thinking about doing gray, but I found out I don't have any gray, so white it is. I'm just going to go through and put down some base coats of color, and I'm going to try using the airbrush to do some shading and also highlighting, and we'll just see how it goes. I started with a base coat of orange-brown, and I had to do about 3 coats of this to get full coverage. I'm pretty picky about Jabba being orange and green rather than beige and green, as we saw with some of the later CGI versions that they made. Then I decided to break out the airbrush and start a little bit of shading using a brown color, and I was a little bit conservative at first because I was afraid of making it too dark, and I also am not very good at using the airbrush still, so I was feeling my way, but it started to look pretty good, I thought. I then moved on to adding some highlights by hand with a brush, which worked okay, but it seemed like it was going to take too long and be too difficult for all of the tiny wrinkles he has, so I did some dry brushing, which I wasn't very happy with, so I decided to go over the whole thing with a coat of a bit more of an orange color to kind of bring it all together, and then I started adding highlights with the airbrush, which is the first time I've really done this very much, but it really worked quite well. Here I'm adding a brown wash to kind of help blend things together, and I wasn't sure if this was going to look good. It was kind of a thing that I was playing by ear, and a lot of this is just kind of trial and error to see what looks good and what doesn't. It was not as if I had a master plan for all of this, and I'm just going through the steps. I had to kind of see what would work and what didn't. In fact, I was not at all sure that it was going to work out until I started adding this green, and I thought it started really looking like Jabba and looking much better than it had before. I really like the way the airbrush was able to blend this green color into the orange, and it really didn't take very long at all. It was surprisingly fast. So I decided to move on to the eyes after I got most of the skin taken care of. And the eyes are, in fact, one of the more difficult parts of painting Jabba. He's got very complex eyes with various colors, and they're also very alien looking in their anatomy, so if you don't get it quite right, it's going to look off. But I did my best to sort of integrate all the colors and everything, and I think actually this is my most successful attempt at recreating Jabba's eyes to date. I also decided to include some of the white drool that he has in the corners of his mouth. This kind of varies from scene to scene how much there is and where it's placed, so you can have some freedom as to where you want to put it. Then I took some gloss coat, put it on the eyes so that they would appear wet, and also put it on the nostrils and around the mouth, anywhere that would be wet with spittle or whatever. I had left the base entirely unpainted while I did Jabba because I thought it was relatively easy to do, and I was more concerned about being able to pull off Jabba's head, so to speak. But this actually was a little bit challenging. Getting the stone the right color in particular has always been a little bit tricky. It's sort of a brownish grayish color. For the gargoyle heads, I started with a dark brown and then went on top of that with a bronze color, went on top of that with a sort of dark brown wash, and then actually I went back and put some more gray into the stone right there because I wasn't satisfied with how it looked. I picked out some of the details with bronze to make them look a little bit more metallic, and then put a whitish bluish wash on top, and then wiped most of that off with a Kleenex to give it a corroded look. But before the big reveal, I'd like to talk to you about this video's sponsor, SKILLSHARE. SKILLSHARE is an online learning community with thousands of different classes on a wide variety of topics, from fine art to photography, business, and self-improvement. There are no ads, and they're adding new premium classes all the time, so you're sure to find something that interests you. Photography has been a hobby of mine for many years, so I decided to take the class Outdoor Photography, See, Shoot, and Share the Beauty Around You by Min T. He talks about how you can take visually interesting photos of relatively mundane things like buildings or parking lots, and explains some of his process, including his equipment, how he selects what to photograph, and how he processes the photos after taking them. I hope to make use of some of his advice the next time I go out and take photos. If you'd like to give Skillshare a try, the first 1,000 people to click the link in the video description will get a free month of full access to Skillshare. Thanks again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. In my last video, which was about the Hutt twins model that I 3D printed and painted, I said that I wasn't really entirely happy with how the final product ended up, and a lot of people kindly chimed in to say that I was being too hard on myself, and maybe I was, but it can be frustrating when something doesn't come out exactly the way you wanted it to. By contrast, though, this one turned out even better than I had expected, I think, especially the Jabba part here, his face. I really am happy with how that turned out. All of the color blending and everything looks really good, I think, and especially the eyes, I think I was able to pull off without any real problems as well. I do still have problems controlling the airbrush and getting it to do exactly what I want, but I was able to do some very fine highlighting and detail work with it that I wasn't even really aware that you could do with an airbrush. So it kind of has opened up some new possibilities for me, and I'm excited to use it on future projects. As I said, I'm not entirely sure if it's possible to get this bust at this point, although I will link to Michael White, the sculptor, and if you're really interested in it, maybe you can talk to him and he can point you in the right direction. I'm not sure. It is, in any case, a very sort of limited edition kind of thing, but I'm glad I was able to get one for myself and that it turned out pretty well when I painted it as well. So I'll definitely be putting this on display in my collection with my other Star Wars mini busts. Thanks again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and to my patrons on Patreon for sponsoring all of my videos, including these Palace VIPs right here, and Angelica Brady. Thank you all very much for your support. If you'd like to know about how you can support the channel for as little as $1 a month, you can click the link in the video description.